Welcome to this week's episode of Insight. During this week's show, we're going to cover three topics. The first one is we're going to give you an update on the ongoing parliamentary campaigns in Armenia. Then we're going to move on to the recent visit of EU Enlargement Commissioner Kos to Armenia. And then we're going to close with an update on Gagik Tsarukyan's latest project, which is building a Noah's Ark in Armenia. On the campaign, what's been noticeable over the last week or 10 days is the Prime Minister and his team and his cohorts constantly bringing up the Artsakh issue, even though, frankly, it's not one of the top issues of concern to the voters. And there's actually logical reasons behind it. For their plan was moving into this election cycle this year was to talk about what we call the negative identity. They were going to be running against three things. The first one was going to be Russia. The second one was going to be the old regime. And the third one was going to be the issue of the church. But what we've had over the last few months is somewhat collapsing of some of these narratives. First and foremost, in Russia, in polling, is actually a lot less popular, a lot less unpopular than it was a couple of years ago. We've seen a rise in opinions of Russia since 23, which was the lowest point. Then you have the collapse of the Kocharyan campaign, because in the minds of voters, when you're talking about old regime, you're actually essentially talking about Kocharyan and Sarkisyan, who's not even in the election. And with the threat of Kocharyan actually coming back to power dissipating, that has become less of an issue. And obviously, when it comes to the issue of the church, this is something that it was a debacle, and this government actually paid the price in popularity by going after the church, and they actually walked away from it. So what they're trying to do is to use the last, issue, which is their primary issue, which is the issue that they've brought peace to the country, or so-called peace to the country, by using the Artsakh issue to actually tell that narrative. The best examples of this is recently, in a speech, the Prime Minister actually accused the people of Artsakh of actually running away and not fighting against the enemy. Then you had the Deputy Speaker, Ruben Rubinyan, saying that Dadivank, the famous monastery in Artsakh, is no different than the Armenian church in St. Petersburg. And we saw the same thing from our speaker, Alan Simonyan, who wanted to pick a fight with a reporter for using the word Artsakh rather than Karabakh. Essentially, scapegoating Artsakh refugees is the way to deliver the peace narrative, i.e. anybody who criticizes them for their responsibility for the ethnic cleansing in 23, or their inability to actually build deterrence or military capacity for the country. They can use this issue to make them as being pro-war or for pro-confrontation and not supportive of peace. What can we say about this?
Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
Now, is this likely to work in the context of the campaign? And politically, it's hard to say. There's a block of very nationalist voters for whom Artsakh is very important and still is, for whom these kinds of provocations are sort of a red bull, waving a red flag to a bull as far as for them to come out and vote against him in June 7th. I think what they're counting on is there's an equal, if not larger, number of voters, let's call them the peace first, peace above all voters who fear war, and will be responsive to this message, and that they can hope that that group actually overwhelms the first. Only time will tell if this idea is correct or not. Now we'll move on to the candidacy of Hayk Marutyan, who's the former mayor of Yerevan, and he entered the parliamentary elections as the head of the New Power Party. He's a former comedian and a quite popular mayor of Yerevan, and he will sort of compete with the Bolorin Dem party and the Arman Tatoyan party for a particular cast of voters, which are going to be the pro-Western but anti-Nikol, but generally it's just the Yerevan middle class type voters, which really have no place to go. And he will actually, there's actually a market for him with those voters. And if you actually look at the product that he's putting out there, he's actually running some of the most interesting social media spots. Let's see a few of them.
Մամորոտար երկես գործակալ ենք, եք, 5-րդ տանիվ եք, աստեցիցեմ գործակալ եք։
Մամուլի գրապների
նստեք տեղների։
Making love with you is all I wanna do.
Այսօր իրանք բերել եք, որպես ցույցի մատերիալ, 5000 դրամով ցույցերի բերելու համար։
Loving you is more than just a dream come true. And everything that I
Տանեմ լսեմ ածի պատվալը։ Ասի, վերեք տեղը տասի, ներբերես շուտես։
He could very well overperform because someone's going to catch the voters' imagination, especially if he can bring out younger voters, which are so much disaffected with our political process, or sort of higher income voters that have sort of washed their hands of the political system. Most of his base is in Yerevan, and if we can actually get decent turnout in town, there's a reasonable chance that he passes the 4% threshold to make the next parliament. Before we move on the election topic, there was an ugly incident at St. Anna's Church on Sunday, which was the Palm Sunday celebrations, that the Prime Minister visited with a group of his political aides and bodyguards, and a young man unfortunately tried to assault him. Let's be clear about one thing. Under no circumstances is it proper to physically assault or even threaten to physically assault any political leaders or any citizens. So we need to condemn that. But does this surprise me? Unfortunately, no. When you have a political culture in which instead of having political opponents, you have political enemies, we should not be surprised with unfortunate outbursts like this. This is an atmosphere that's been created by all sides in our political system, but in truth, over the past year and a half, it's primarily the responsibility of this government that goes out of its way to label anyone who opposes it as being somehow pro-war, pro-Russia, or an agent of the old regime. Now let's move on to EU Commissioner Kos's visit to Armenia. Commissioner Kos came to Armenia for a 2-day visit, partly reviewing the progress on the EU's €270 million resilience and growth plan for Armenia. 2 new financing agreements worth €135 million for the financing of the Caucasus Transmission Network project, were signed in her presence. During her visit to Yerevan, Marta, the European Union's Commissioner for Enlargement, spoke about the hybrid threat rapid response team being sent to Armenia in preparation for June's parliamentary elections. Kos denied claims that it constitutes election interference, but instead that the body uses its experience to defend democracies from disinformation and cyber attacks. There's one part of the interview with Commissioner Kos that stood out for me. Let's watch.
The democratic and institutions that you will be able to have free and fair elections.
The threat comes also from Azerbaijan and Turkey, and not just Russia, right?
You know, you are the one who is analyzing the fake news or disinformation. So there, you know, in the times of digitalization, the fake news are spreading around much faster than the truth.
What was interesting is she was actually asked that specific question twice, and twice she refused to answer it. Interestingly enough, there was an MP from the ruling party, Lilit Minasyan, who actually raised the same issue in Parliament about disinformation campaigns targeting this country. They do not just come from Russia, they actually come from both Turkey and Azerbaijan. What are we to make of all this? Frankly, I have no problems with our country engaging with the European Union or other democracies to fight Russian interference in our elections, because it's actually real and we see its impact on a daily basis. But at the same time, we need to ask ourselves, when we're looking at foreign interference, which is a more pernicious type of foreign interference? Is it Russian postings on telegrams spreading lies about political figures here, or foreign dictators essentially threatening our voters with war if they vote for the wrong person? Now we're going to move on to the last and fun topic of the week, which is the new Noah's Ark that's being built by Gagik Tsarukyan. When he's building his Jesus statue, behind the Jesus statue, on the hill behind it, they're building a new Noah's Ark. This is essentially based on the designs from the book of Genesis. Apparently the first floor is going to be 2 of each of the animals. The second story is going to be housing, which I'm assuming might be hotels in this case. A third story is going to be the birds, and we can only assume that the fourth story will be a banquet hall. What can we say about all of this, outside of the fact that it's actually likely to work and bringing a lot of money and tourists to the country, so I have absolutely no problems with it. I just have a special request to Mr. Tsarukyan, since on the first floor of the Ark, He's going to have 2 of each of the land species. I can just hope that he actually keeps a permanent display of 2 of our members of parliament that will rotate over the years. Thank you for joining me. This is Social Insights.
Ձգում եմ ես լրված միջև սաղ սարթնեն ու չեմ համեմատի քեզ ոչ մի բանի հետ դու հասարակ ես ու ինձի դզելա հենց այդ սաղի աշկերը հանեմ սաղի աշկերը վրետ քո համար չի երիքի դաժե 5 հատ կուպլետ ուսում եմ գերկեմ ասում ես էլ շուտա սպասում եմ գանձե վրետ գցեմ իմ կուրկը բայց ոնց որ սաղնի ինձ հակառակ դու է գիտես գժվում եմ պայտակ պես մենե քո համար պես մենե քո համար պես մենե քո համար պես մենե քո համար սիրում ես ձեր տանդեմի այն կամար մեկ է շոկ ճարարե ոտ ամառը հիմա ուզում ես դու գնաս բայց մի կերպ եմ ես բռնել քո դամարը